Hello everyone, my name is Holly and I work in genealogy and local history at the Columbus Public Library. This video is part of a series about Ancestry 101, genealogy resources you can take home. In this series I will be introducing books in our collection that can help patrons focus on an area of genealogy interest. You can reserve these titles and have them delivered to any of our branches. Today's topic is one of a kind. These are single subject books that cover a variety of genealogy interests. We have a lot in our collection, so I'll try and cover 10 books in 10 minutes. Here we go. To start off, we have a different kind of book about our ancestors' first, or given, names, called the First Name Reverse Dictionary by Yvonne Navarro. A short introduction describes the book's 3 parts: meanings related to female names, meanings related to male names, and a first name index. If you're curious about the meaning of someone's name, skip directly to the index, which will refer you to either the female or male definitions. Some names are attributed to both sexes, like Dorcas, which is Greek for girl with dark eyes, but in Hebrew, for a male, it means a roe deer from the forest. Next, we have Tracing History Through Title Deeds by Nat Alcock. Deeds are the most numerous but least used source of historical evidence, but for those of you who have located ancestors in England, Ireland, or Wales, this book tells you where you can look for the deeds, what they contain, and how you can extract and apply the evidence. Here's a parchment deed from 1697 for the sale of a house in Gloucestershire. I wish I had a transcription for this one because it includes the date, the king's name, how long he's reigned, family relationships, and perhaps financial arrangements, place names, and the history of the building. If you have trouble reading old script, we also have a book for that. Now, if you've done enough research on your family that you want to post it to a blog or even publish a book, check out How to Write Your Personal and Family History by Keith E. Banks. As there is no one accepted way of relating your family history, this book offers creative ways to do so, like keeping a journal, compiling pictorial histories, and writing a chronology. How about creating a family cookbook, a family calendar, making your own coat of arms, or a family flag? Help children create their own personal histories and follow simple methods of binding these memories together in book form. There are samples of a timetable, a short biography, and a transcribed oral history interview. Next, we have a book by Bertram Hawthorne Grunn called Tracing Your Civil War Ancestor. From mustering in to mustering out, this book offers help with tracing your Civil War ancestor's military history. Follow the battles your ancestor fought and read about the history of your ancestor's military unit. Collectors of Civil War ephemera will be interested in this book as well to help identify things like inscriptions or photographs. Several helpful appendices list source books to identify weapons, regimental histories and rosters, and institutions that hold microfilmed service records from the National Archives. Our next book comes with glowing reviews from professional genealogists. Dating Old Photographs, 1840 to 1919, published by Family Chronicle, has more than 650 reproductions of old photographs to give you a reference point to identify the time frame for your pictures. By comparing the styles of clothing, the hair fashions, the way people posed, and even the background settings, you might be able to narrow down your dates to within a few years. The book's reproductions from the 1840s and 1850s are grouped together, but beginning with 1860, they are grouped in 5-year periods, like 1860 to 1864. The author discusses the dates that daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, tintypes, carte de visite, and cabinet cards were used. From the antebellum updos to the roaring 20s finger waves and bobs, this book has a variety of details to examine that can help you date your photos to the right decade. Next, we have a book that lists over 3,500 names of German-speaking immigrants. The title is The Germans of Colonial Georgia, 1733 to 1783 by George F. Jones. The book is a culmination of a lifetime of research about the so-called Georgia Dutch immigrants. During this 50-year period, they represented the largest ethnic group in Georgia. The first to come in the 1730s were Lutheran Salzburgers as refugees from the Catholic Archbishopric in what would later become Austria. They founded the village of Ebenezer near Savannah, where you can see the Jerusalem Evangelical Lutheran Church, which was built in 1769, and browse in the Salzburgers Museum. The Palatines from the southern Rhineland, Swabians, and Swiss were later arrivals. The author used an abundance of records and says it is unlikely that many German families have been overlooked in the list, but he does caution that the British officials had trouble understanding German, which led to a variety of recorded spellings. His aim is to give an identity to all German-speaking people hidden behind the various garbled versions of their names, and where possible to give their relationships and their European origins. If you find that our copy has been checked out, you can also find a copy at Ancestry.com. Now, sooner or later, your children or grandchildren will be asked to fill out a family tree for show and tell. Give them a head start with the book Roots for Kids by Susan Provost Beller. Her book is based on a 12-week course she designed for her 4th grade class. Each chapter represents a 45-minute class session with homework assignments and class handouts. This book is a wonderful introduction to learning about a family's history, the real people who fought in wars, were pioneers, or came to America as pilgrims. It will enrich any student's understanding of history when he or she locates ancestors in time and place and see the roles they played in building a nation. Another book about names in our collection is Indian Place Names in Alabama by William A. Reed. The book centers around the Choctaw and the Creek, or Muskogee, languages, since almost all the Native American tribes that formerly inhabited Alabama belong to the Muskogean family. There are 231 Indian place names that have survived, 80 of which are Choctaw, 117 are Creek, and 9 are Cherokee. Goodreads says this book remains the best single compendium on the origins and history of the Indian names that dot the map of Alabama. Historians, geographers, students of the English language, and of course genealogists with ancestors in Alabama will be interested to find out things like who named the Alabama and Tennessee rivers, or how did Opelika and Tuscaloosa get their names, or how do you pronounce Chiaha, Talladega, or these. Next up, we have James M. Beidler's The Family Tree Historical Newspapers Guide, How to Find Your Ancestors in Archived Newspapers. The author says that if you haven't found your ancestors in newspapers, you simply haven't researched enough newspapers yet. Articles have been published in America for over 300 years, and during the period between 1850 and 1950, newspapers were the social media of the time. So what kind of information can you find? News articles, everything from the opening of a new store in town to casualty lists from international military conflicts. You might find your ancestors were victims of accidents, homicides, or natural disasters. Advertisements. Display ads for goods and services were placed next to news articles that editors expected to be heavily read. Check for notices of real estate transfers or even probate news, especially if the original records do not exist or are not online. Editorials, usually one-sided and biased, but they can give you a sense about the time and place in which your ancestor lived. Features and social columns. The social goings-on in churches, clubs, reunion news, engagements, marriages, visitations, and birth announcements are just some of the kinds of ways your ancestor's name might be in print. When you search, remember that newspaper formats differ from time to time and place to place. An obituary might be interspersed between the notice of a runaway indentured servant, or it might be listed after a list of ship arrivals. Finally, for anyone that wants to become a board-certified genealogist, check out the BCG Genealogical Standards Manual by the Board for Certification of Genealogists. Like all certification programs, professional genealogists must adhere to research standards when collecting data, comparing and analyzing evidence, following proof rules, and compiling information. There are standards for lecturers, instructors, and educational writers to follow, and continuing education requirements. Examples are given for each type of report that a genealogist might provide a client, like a proof summary, a compiled lineage, a compiled pedigree, and a compiled genealogy. And here are the genealogical proof standard guidelines. Well, I know I probably ran over the 10-minute mark, but hope you'll find a book to check out that will further your family's history. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.